The more you tell them they need to stop, they need to quiet down, the louder they get. It's a really good chance that what you're experiencing is what Dr. Siegel calls the downstairs tantrum. That's a situation where your child literally can't stop doing what they're doing. And I know there are a lot of people that will hear me say that and go, no, I don't buy that. I think it's just them not wanting to stop. They could if they wanted to, but they just don't want to. So I'm not going to let them off the hook that easy. And while I do agree there are times when a child could be throwing a manipulative tantrum, we could call it that, you can tell the difference. Because if a child's melting down and you say something to them and they respond to you, they answer your question, then they do have some upstairs functioning going on. And I had my grandkids with me over Christmas holiday, and I have a 3-year-old who's a pretty high emotion little guy, and he was told no, and he absolutely just fell into a million pieces on the floor, and he was screaming and yelling. And his mom had seen this obviously a few times, and so all she did was she turned and started to walk away and said to, not even to him, but as she's walking away, well, I guess the rest of us will go play outside in the snow. And he immediately said, I want to go in the snow. I want to go. And he was done, and off he went, and he got dressed, and he went out and played. That's not the same thing I'm talking about. You still got some upstairs stuff going on. But if she'd have said that and he would have screamed louder and louder, and she'd have come back and said, you are not going to go out if you don't knock this off, and he would scream louder and louder, chances are pretty high she would have been appealing to a part of his brain that wasn't even working. And that's just making things worse. I think a lot of times as parents, if we don't think about what's going on with our kids, we can set them up to make things worse than they are when it all started. So I'm hoping that these discussions that we have today will help you at least kind of come to terms with why some of the things are happening in your kids' heads and how you can actually invite certain behaviors. I firmly believe that we are in the business of inviting behavior. The more we invite, the less we have to threaten. And when you use threats to get behavior change, you're basically saying to someone, I'm in control, you better do what I want, or you're going to deal with the consequences that I want to put in your life. And that's not teaching them anything, except they have no control of what's going on in their life. And our job as parents is to teach them that they have control. Teach them that they can do things and say things that are going to bring positives into their life. A lot of times I've been asked to do parenting classes, and sometimes I'll start off a parenting class by actually asking people to write down what they believe is a definition of good, effective parenting or effective discipline. And then I'll gather them up and I'll read them and just try to get a sense of what kind of a tone I'm working with in the group. And I see a lot of the same kinds of words. I see consequences a lot. I see punishment. I see make kids mind kinds of things. Not exactly the words I'm looking for, but it kind of helps reinforce kind of where our default buttons are as parents. Sometimes we get caught up in that's really what we're all about. It's just to make kids do what we want them to do. And somewhere in our minds, we justify that by doing that, they'll learn somewhere down the road that this was all for their good and that we really weren't trying to make their life miserable. We really did want them to be better off. But in that moment, what's really happening in their brain is what we really need to be more concerned about. And I'm not sure that that's a message that's being sent. Like I said, I regularly see the word consequences in the definition, but it's generally associated with the negative tone. Most of the time, it's the idea that when a child misbehaves, then a parent, a good, effective, disciplining parent, will put a consequence in place that will keep them from continuing that behavior. And what I'd like to just kind of throw out there, and you know this, but to think about is one of those things, like I said when we started, if you can get yourself focused on what you want to see, then that's what you'll look for, is how can we make the consequence experience more of a positive thing? I'm always going to be someone who falls on the side of, to change a behavior, I'm going to offer more of a positive consequence that a child knows that they want for doing that thing rather than threatening to take it away. If I ask a child to do a behavior and offer them something that I know they want, then they get a benefit from it. If I tell them they're going to do it or I'm going to take it away, then all they really learn is that I have all the power and authority and I can make their life miserable. And that's not the message that I want to send to them. I want them to see a benefit in doing what they're doing. I want to offer them something that they want to get to do the behavior change, because by doing it, we're rewriting and rewiring in the brain the things that we want them to do. How we get them to do it isn't as important as the fact that it gets done. And this is something that I find a lot of people struggle with in pre-service when I introduce this idea, because there's an attitude that I don't need to reinforce things that kids should be doing anyway. I shouldn't have to offer them to something for doing a job that they should just do because they live in this house. And what I want to propose is that the idea of getting them to do that is going to be the mechanism that will rewire what's going on in the brain. And the more that rewiring happens, the more that becomes a default option as they consider whether or not they want to do that behavior. So yeah, there's no way around the fact that you can make children behave a certain way. You can threaten them, you can intimidate them, you can make life seem like it's going to be pretty miserable if they don't do what you want. But what comes out the other end of that interaction isn't the relationship building thing that we're looking for. I think you're going to have more positive effect on kids if, when all is said and done, they see you as being on the same page as them. That they don't see you as forcing them to do something, you're inviting them to do something. And then you're helping them see why that benefited them. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, really all you're saying is manipulate them. And I have no problem with manipulation personally. I think all of us manipulate our world every day. The only time I struggle with manipulation is if somebody gets hurt by someone else's manipulative behavior. But if you really stop and think about how you craft your day, you're manipulating your world and everything you do to come out the best you can for you. And what we want to be able to do is help kids learn that as well. So I mentioned as we were starting that what we don't need in the world are more warden parents. And so what I want to do quickly is just show you what I mean by that and kind of give you an illustration of how I hope you're not doing the parenting thing. So let's look at the day in the life of the child. Gets up in the morning, has this little, well, that's a good thing. Let's see what's that. That's pretty early. That's the kid gets up, goes, has breakfast, puts his dishes in the sink without being asked. Comes over here, doesn't really want to go to school, kind of gives you some garbage about going to school, has kind of a bad moment, but changes their mind, comes back to, gets back there, and we're going to get ready to go to school. We're having a better attitude. Comes home, doesn't really want to do his homework. You can see how this goes, kind of like the normal life in the day of a child. So let's look at how their warden parent would handle the situation. Now, let me just tell you right off the bat that a warden is concerned with one thing only. A warden's only desire is that a child be compliant. So a warden needs to have a child that's doing what they're saying to be able to maintain their status as a warden parent. So a warden would see this positive moment that a child experienced, and they would just kind of say to themselves, well, look, I'm such a great parent. They've been taught. They get up, they have their breakfast, they put their dish in the sink. I did exactly what I needed to do as a parent. Get over to here where the child decided they didn't want to go to school, didn't want to wear that outfit that mom put out, whatever it is, and the parent comes right down, gets in their face and says, no, you don't act like that around here. You'll do what you're told or there'll be consequences. So just get ready. The car's leaving in 5 minutes and you're going to be in it getting ready to go to school. And then they're back up doing what wardens do. And that is looking for compliance. So we see this moment of compliance where the kid finally does get ready. They're ready to get in the car to go to school, and the warden parent just breezes over it and says, see how good I am at this? All I have to do is give them a little bit of a nudge, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. We get back to this one. I can't remember what this one was. Oh, they come home from school and they don't want to do their homework. The warden parent gets right in their face and says, that's not how things work around here. You're going to do your homework, and if you don't do your homework, you're not going to be able to go play at your friend's house. You know how the routine goes. And then they're back up watching for compliance. They see compliance, and they say, see what a good parent I am. I can teach my kids to do what they need to do, and they behave. Now, if you look at this little scenario of the day in the life of this child and their parent, there's a couple things that I want you to think about. And the first one is behaviors that are reinforced are more likely to be repeated. If you think about this little scenario that we just went through, obviously the only behaviors that are being reinforced are the negative behaviors. These positive behaviors are getting no attention from the parent. The parent seeing them happen and just saying in their head, that's exactly how you should act. So you get nothing for that. You do what you're supposed to do, or you're going to get some trouble. And that's when they get the interaction from the caregiver. So if we look at it that way, a parent who's in the warden mentality actually has to behave this way to maintain this kind of a relationship. And they have to have this kind of a relationship to maintain their status as a warden parent. This is not the kind of a relationship that we're trying to maintain or trying to build on as we intervene in disciplinary situations. So back to the concept, every interaction is a teaching interaction. I mentioned this a little bit briefly earlier, that no matter what we do, good or bad, is teaching something. So what we need to be able to do as caregivers is before we open our mouth and say something that we regret, before we do something in the heat of a moment that we know we don't mean. I don't know about you, but I know when I was raising my kids, there were times when I would lose it and I would be saying, my mouth would be saying something that my brain was saying, why are you saying that? You are not going to ground him for 2 months. You don't want him here for 2 months. Why are you saying that? Knock it off. Shut up. And I would just keep talking. We've probably all experienced those kinds of things. And I go back now and I think back, and not only do I think back, but I have my kids who remind me of the things that I've said. And I realize that the smallest of things that I said when I was in those moments, combined with the emotion of the moment, wrote on their brains. I mean, they're in their mid-30s now, and they can remember very specific things that I said or did as a parent that I'm not doing with their kids. I'm a very different person with my grandkids, their children, as I interact with them. In fact, I've had all of my kids say to me, where were you when we were little? Why weren't you like this when you were parenting us? And I think we all go through that learning process of what's really important. I really wish, I think probably the best parenting class I could ever teach would just be to inject people with grandparent blood. To be able to just say what's really important here, because most of the time as a grandparent, your focus is on the relationship. Yeah, you know that the kids get to be dealt with by their parents as far as the discipline goes, but your focus is on the important things. And those are the things that I kind of hope come out of the discussion that we have today, is what are the important things? What do we really need to be looking for as we interact with the kids? So I told you that I asked my groups what the definition of effective discipline is, and I kind of compiled a lot of the stuff that I get from them and what I want to see as a definition, and I came up with this. And as you read through it, I just want to kind of point out a couple of things that I hope make some sense. First off, I want to just say that I think discipline is a strategy. It's not something that we just leave for the moment, but when a child does something that we consider a misbehavior, all of a sudden we decide we need to discipline, and we just go with what they did and we react to it. I think if we don't look at it as a strategy, then we allow ourselves to be in that situation where we're just kind of reacting. If we plan for some things, if we look for some things, if we be a little preventive in how we interact with kids, then we allow for this atmosphere of learning that I have down there. Because really that's kind of what I'm hoping this comes across as, is that we have a responsibility to create this atmosphere where kids can learn. We get to teach, we get to be examples, but the outgoing message is that they get to learn, that they get to be able to learn things that they can take into their lives in the future and use to benefit themselves, to bring positive consequences, to help them do things that will better their life. I think if we don't look at discipline as a strategy, then what we do, we find ourselves in a place where really all we're doing is dealing with the present situation. We're not looking towards the future. And in my mind, effective discipline is way more about future behavior than it is about present behavior. Of course, we're dealing with present behavior, but if we do it in a way that it teaches for the future, then that's going to benefit everyone down the line. So our job is to help them make decisions that bring positive consequences in their life. And yes, there are positive consequences. Helping them understand what those are and showing them how to get them is one of the ways that we can help them get to the place that we'd like them to be in down the road when they start making decisions based on consequences that they're going to get. And as I said earlier, speaking of consequences, I've always been one, as I mentioned, to try and offer more of the positive rather than threatening the negatives, and then allowing them to see that this is what's going to make a difference in future decisions. And then as they do those things, then what we want to be able to do is reinforce what happened by talking about it. Again, this is nothing more than, as Dr. Siegel would say, another opportunity to rewire what's going on in the brain. If they've just had an experience where something positive happened, we kind of tend to look at that and say, oh, good, well, that's a great thing. But if we miss the opportunity to reinforce what it was, then we miss the benefit of having them be able to add that to pull on in the future. So when you see a child who possibly does something positive when they may have naturally used a negative intervention or negative behavior, if you don't reinforce the positive nature of that, then we miss the opportunity of rewiring again the benefit of what they got by doing that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But think about it kind of like as it pertains to, we've all played the hot cold game. And we've all been in a room where someone did something and someone's come in that didn't know where it got hidden. And the minute they take a step, if the hot cold game is going to be effective, they start getting feedback. The minute they take a step, someone says cooler or warmer or cold or hot, and the farther they get away from it, the colder they get, the responses from the rest of the people in the group, the closer they get, the warmer, the hotter, the scalding. Think about how effective or ineffective that hot cold game would be if you didn't make a sound, you didn't even respond to the person until they somehow found their way exactly to where that thing was and were just about to reach out and grab it. There would be no benefit in the rest of the group being able to help handling it that way. When you do the hot cold game as it pertains to disciplining kids, I'm wanting you to look at it in these kind of terms. If you, for example, have a child who has the job of cleaning up the kitchen counter after dinner, and they know they have the job, you know they have the job, and as the dishes are being cleared up, they get up and they head towards the kitchen counter and they start cleaning it up. At that moment, reinforcing the positive behavior would require you to go to them and say, I so appreciate that you got up and immediately started cleaning up the kitchen counter. I think that's just awesome. I know that you knew it was your job, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you doing it. That's what I'm talking about by reinforcing the positive. It'd be really easy to just watch them do that and say, okay, you're doing your job. That's your job, so you're doing it. That's exactly what needs to happen. Good, you can stay here. What we want to be able to do is get in the mentality of, again, thinking about how this is impacting the brain. So by reinforcing it, we're just, again, solidifying those behaviors that we want to see repeated. Because remember, the behaviors that get the reinforcement of the behaviors that get repeated. So think about it that way. Maybe that will help. I know a lot of people struggle with the attitude that they have to thank a child for doing something that's expected. And really what we're trying to do, rather than just thank them for doing something expected, is teach them that there are benefits and positive things when you do those things. I mean, not everyone gets thanks and praise for everything they do. But what we want them to be able to do is learn that there are people who recognize that there are positives, and that connection that will happen, that emotion that will be associated with that moment when you thank them, when you reinforce that. That's the stuff that really matters when we start talking about what's going on in the brain. So I want to get into a little bit more of some detail about what I want to talk about for the rest of the time. And I've put this together in one of those crafty little slides where you see a whole bunch of words and you figure out what the word is that you're looking for. So in a very subtle way, I've told you the word that I want you to see. Can you tell by chance what that might be? I know, not so subtle. But this is the word that I'm looking for in those descriptions and definitions of what effective parenting is. Sometimes when I have the people tell me those things in classes, I want to see this word. I want to see teach. I want to see that we recognize that our job is to be that example, is to be that person who can help them achieve their best self, who can invite them, who can show them ways by doing those things that they can benefit from it. So those are the things that I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do as teachers, as instructors. I much prefer those words to disciplinarian. There's something that just doesn't sound good about it. So let's talk about the different concepts. T I have standing for timing matters. And when I say timing matters, I mean in a lot of different ways. Developmentally, timing is crucial. To understand where these kids are behaving developmentally puts you in a place where you then know where you need to be interacting. If you're dealing with a 9-year-old and you're expecting normal 9-year-old behaviors, and this is a child that's functioning at 5 or 6, then their developmental age is critical for you to know where and when to intervene and how to intervene in a disciplinary scenario. So developmentally, timing is important. You need to know as quick as you can when a child comes into your care. You need to be able to zero in on their developmental age. And the caseworkers can help you with that. The ASPs that you get for the younger kids will help you with that. The mental health assessments that the older kids have will help you with that. But if you're struggling dealing with trying to figure out the developmental age of the children that you're taking care of, get some help from your caseworker or the child and family team, because the longer it takes you to figure out where they are developmentally, the more time gets wasted on interventions that may not do anything but create a huge void between their behavioral capacity and your behavioral expectation. And all that's going to do is be frustrating for everyone involved. So developmentally, timing is obviously critical. If you have a 2 or 3-year-old and they do something at 9 or 10 in the morning and you forget to address it until 7 or 8 at night, their developmental state is something that should say to you, I'm not going to accomplish anything by coming to them now and saying, you know, this morning you knocked your little brother over, you're not going to get to go play at your friend's house tomorrow because of that. At 3 years old, 6 eternities have passed from 9 in the morning until 7 at night. So they're not going to connect in their brain that what they did that morning is the reason why they're not going to be able to go play tomorrow morning. So that's just not going to be beneficial for anybody. So understanding that aspect of timing is critical as well. There's another concept with regard to timing that I think is important to be aware of as well, and that involves us as much as the kids, and that is timing as it pertains to your being able to be human. And what I mean by that is, I know for me, I am not a morning person. I don't like it. I'm not happy in the morning. I'm not pleasant. My wife's the opposite. She's not a nighttime person. She's up really early. We have about 3 hours in the middle of the day where we are functioning at about the same energy level. And if we talk about things during those 3 hours, we actually can communicate. If she comes to me first thing in the morning and she wants to talk to me about something that's really important to her, I'm just annoyed because I don't like morning and I'm not thinking. And if I go to her after I get home from work at 10 o'clock and I want to talk to her, she's not there. This pertains to kids as we talk about discipline. Some kids are just not as good in the morning as they are in the middle of the day. Some parents aren't as good in the morning. If you know you're not a morning person, you probably had those times when in the morning your child does something that doesn't make you happy and you're looking at them and you've had that feeling, or you're looking at them more as a target as anything else. And you're just not happy that morning happens and you're not happy they did this in the morning. and you're going to make them pay because you're not happy that it's morning. That aspect of timing, I'm just asking you to pay attention to and be aware of when you are your best self. When your timing is in a better place and you're more aware of your own emotions and your own situation, that's when you're going to do your best discipline, your best parenting. And that's not always going to be possible. I'm just saying when it is possible, then those are the things and those are the times that I would suggest you deal with some of those behaviors. And older kids can wait a few hours before they sit down and talk about something. And sometimes they need to wait a little bit of time so that they can calm down before they're in a place where, again, we've got the upstairs, specifically the upstairs left portion of the brain, back online to where we can start talking and using words and coming up with some behavioral expectations and having them understand those. So timing is important, timing matters, and we need to be aware of not only how it appeals to or applies to the kids, but also to us as well. The next one, every behavior is purposeful. Excuse me. What I mean by this is there's a why. There's a why for everything that happens. And this goes back again to both of those books that I talked about when we started. The why for us is generally what you're going to find as you read Parenting from the Inside Out. The why for the kids is what you're going to find as you read The Whole Brain Child. But every behavior has a reason behind it. And until we figure out what that reason is, we're just kind of grasping at straws. If your child's throwing a tantrum and you just tell them they have to stop and you intimidate them into stopping, but you haven't figured out that they're throwing a tantrum because they're hungry or they're tired or they're upset about something, even if you get them to stop, all you've really done is postpone the next one. And it will happen pretty quickly. And you will come to them and you will say, we've been through this. You don't act like this. Remember that? You want to have a consequence? If you're seeing something going on and you're not figuring out what's causing it, then all you're really doing is contributing to making it worse. So I'm going to say, get in the habit of asking yourself, why am I seeing this? Why is this child acting like this? Especially if you've got a child who's old enough that they understand that by doing this particular thing, they're going to get a pretty uncomfortable consequence for it, and they still choose to do it, then you really, really, really need to be asking yourself, rather than, okay, how many consequences can I give you to really show you I'm serious about this? You really need to be asking yourself, why would you still do this, knowing what was coming? You still chose to do it. There's something behind that that's pretty important that we need to be aware of. I'll never forget a story years ago. A family that was taking care of a young child, and he was pretty young. He was probably 5 or 6. And they had him for a few months, and he was getting to be pretty comfortable, and everybody was starting to feel like things were working pretty well. One night after dinner, he had a job to do. I can't remember even what his job was, but as he's walking out of the room, Mom reminds him of his job, and he turns around with a gorgeous little 5-year-old smile and looked her in the eye, and he said, "No problem, bitch," and walked out of the room. Now, not the usual response that Mom was getting from her kids when she would ask them to do things. So she was pretty much speechless, which, was a blessing. I'm pretty sure at that moment, had something been able to come out of her mouth, it would have been inappropriate for the situation. She instead goes and grabs the big gun and gets a hold of Dad and says, "Okay, he just called me a bitch. You need to go make sure that doesn't ever happen again." Dad says to her, "Okay, now wait. Remember in class we were supposed to ask ourselves why something's happening before we get all excited about it." And I guess she looked at him and she said, "I don't care what's happening. He just can't do it again. We have other children in this house. We can't have our kids seeing him do that, hearing him call me that, and them not being able to do that. Because they know what's going to happen if they do that. And I don't want to set up a double standard." Well, if you've been doing foster care long enough, you know that there are double standards that are going to happen. And this happened to every one of them. Well, the dad, bless his heart, he goes out and he starts talking to this little guy, and he says to him, "Hey, I understand Mom was just talking to you and asked you to do something, and you said that you would, and then you called her a bitch. Is that true?" And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, can you tell me why that you thought you needed to do that?" And the little kid, I guess, got a really confused look on his face, and he kind of looked at him and he said, "Well, why am I in trouble for it?" And long story short, they start talking to this little guy and found out that in his home, in his bio home, everyone had a nickname. for everyone else. And when they liked each other, they used to call each other their nicknames. And Mom's nickname happened to be the bitch. So what he was really saying to her was, I'm actually starting to like you, bitch. Which was kind of cute. I mean, they're telling me this story, and I'm listening to them, and I looked at her and I went, that is so awful. And of course, her facial expression didn't communicate the same kind of thing and feeling that I had. But what they had actually done was created an environment that had him to a place where he was saying, I'm liking you. Now, obviously, there had to be some change in how he expressed that. And that was taken care of over the next month or two of rewiring his brain to use words that were appropriate when he wanted everyone to know how happy he was, especially Mom. But he had said in the middle of this intervention, you guys keep saying that you like me being here, and none of you have ever called me my name. And the dad said when he said that to him, he said, half of my brain said, do not even ask. And the other half of my brain said, I gotta know. So he said, well, what was your little name? And you probably guessed it. His name was Little Shit. And the dad says to me, with a smile on his face, you have no idea how many times it came to me to call him that, and it would have been a compliment. So what I'm saying, figure out why. When this kind of a situation happens, if they hadn't figured out the why, they would have gone down a very different path. With understanding why he had done what he had done, we were able to make that a positive thing. Now, down the road, Mom was able to look at that and smile. But obviously, in that situation right after that, it wasn't something that made her very happy. But to figure out why it happened was what was most important. The next thing is appropriate consequences. I know and you know that these two words, by themselves and together, could have very different definitions for different people. There are certain people who would think of a consequence as very appropriate, and others would look at that and say, oh, it's not near enough, or it's too severe. And my definition of appropriate consequences, and I'm going to leave it at this, is that the consequence makes sense in the brain of the child. So whatever you can do that will help them in their head understand that behavior was not going to benefit them is what's going to matter, is what's going to be appropriate. And sometimes people tend to be a little on the overcompensating end of the continuum. The more the better kind of a mentality. And I'm thinking that if it's meaningful, it doesn't have to be big. And an appropriate consequence is one that happens and it's done. We learn from it and then move on. And the learning from it comes from us, again, reinforcing what's happened and why it's happened and how it can maybe not happen in the future and what's going to be better for you if you don't do that in the future. And then it's done. It's not something that they have to be reminded about all the time. It's not something that has to be brought up all the time, because that's like you've never paid your price. It's constantly something that you're being reminded about. And again, it's back to, it's kind of what you're looking for. So appropriate consequences, those things that make sense in the brain of the child, which means, in my book, you have to know what's going on in the brain of your child before you can get to what's appropriate. The next one is probably the most difficult one of all of them. If you can't do this one, you probably won't even care about all the rest of them. But we're going to talk about how you can control yourself. And we're going to do it talking about something that every one of us has had occasion to participate on. And that's a teeter-totter. At least I think everybody has. I don't know if they still have them around anymore. But as we talk about this, as I want to talk about it, we're going to talk about it in terms of logic and emotion on a teeter-totter. Because I think the visual will help. Say, for example, you're headed out for an evening this Friday night, and you're going to go watch a movie or whatever. You get a babysitter for the kids. You go out, you have a great evening, and you come home, and you have a kind of an expectation. The expectation being that when you get home, the kids are going to be in their pajamas in bed, the house is going to be pretty much picked up, the babysitter's going to be there, and going to tell you everything went well, going to take them home, and it's going to be a great time. Let's say that you drive in the driveway, you get out of your car, and you clearly know that that little fantasy world that you created in your head is not happening. because you can hear your kids through the walls outside chasing each other around the house before you even get in there. So you open up the door and you step in, and the house is definitely not picked up. The kids are just running around having a great old time facing each other, and all of a sudden one of them catches your eye, and they realize that you're standing there watching this, and they go into freeze frame. And they know by the look on your face that it's very possible that their life could be ending soon. And as they're looking at you and trying to gauge how long they're going to be on this earth, something's going on in your head right now. And it's kind of this. Your emotions just skyrocketed, which is totally perfectly normal. What you expected to see, you didn't see. What you expected to happen, didn't happen. So your emotions take off. Now keep in mind, think about the two sides of the brain. This would be the left side of the brain, this would be the right side of the brain. Your right side of the brain is now in control. The left side of the brain, which is the one that wants answers and wants to fix things, is kind of gone to sleep. Keep in mind what we said earlier. Every interaction is a teaching interaction. If you as a parent at this moment with a very high level of out of control emotion and no logical, rational thinking going on, open your mouth in this moment, what do you think is going to come out and what's it going to teach? I think we can all agree that it's going to come out with a pretty intense tone. There's probably going to be some specific words and facial expressions associated with it, and maybe a sense of impending doom. We don't necessarily want to communicate that to the kids at this moment, because if you think about it, who we're really unhappy with the most is the babysitter. And we don't even know where the babysitter is yet. So what I'm going to say is, before you even open your mouth, I think you need to allow for this to happen. Now that's easy for some and not quite so easy for others. It's a matter of coming to terms with how you are emotionally and how you get a handle on bringing the left half of your brain back online that says, okay, wait, before you say anything stupid, let's just think this through. I'm really not mad at them. I wouldn't expect my kids at bedtime to say to the babysitter, oh, we should be going to bed now. We really shouldn't be up playing and having fun. It's really not their thing. So let's get them to bed. And the more you do this, the more this happens. You remember you were like this, then you start calming yourself down. And what I found is people don't stop here. They keep going here. And what they get is to a place where there's a lot of logical, rational thinking going on. And this does not mean emotions. This means the inclusive emotion. This is the emotion that says, hey, we're on the same page here. We're in the same game here. So let's figure this out. Let's get it taken care of. And let's go in the direction we need to go, which would be, okay, guys, let's get the cameras on. You know, it's time for bed. There's a lot of different ways you could go at that moment. Okay, knock it off. Pick all this stuff up right now. You guys are in so much trouble. You have no idea how miserable your life's going to be tomorrow. There's a lot of things that to be said. None of them terribly beneficial. So when you think about your intervention with children, make sure that your teeter-totter is at least balanced. Make sure you've got as much of this logical, rational thinking going on as you do of the emotion. And when I talk about emotion, I'm talking about positive emotion, an emotion that communicates we're on the same page. We're in this together, because all I think is that we're talking about these parts of the brain again. And people will say to me, well, this sounds a lot like timeout, and I agree. In my view, this little teeter-totter example is really just basically saying timeout. I'm going to give myself enough time to rebalance, to not let this side of my brain become so over-controlling of this side of my brain that I'm not thinking things through and making sure that when I interact, when I say something, that it's appropriate. So timeout to me, people ask me all the time, what do you think about timeout? And I think it's great as long as this is what it's used for. I don't like timeout that is structured by minute, like you're 9, so you get 9 minutes of timeout every time you're in timeout. Because what happens is at 4 minutes, I'm balanced on my teeter-totter, and I'm ready to talk about it. And you say to me, I'm sorry, you have 5 more minutes if you're 9. Then my teeter-totter's all balanced again, my emotions are up, my logic's down, and I've lost that opportunity to teach. So I don't have a problem with timeout. This is what it's used for. I think there are a couple things that we can ask ourselves if we're in these situations with kids. That to make sure that we're in a place, as we've talked about, that we're going to do things that are going to make things better instead of making things worse. And one is, how are you feeling about the interaction that's going on? If you can, and keep in mind that by being able to even come up with an answer to this, you have to be at least balanced in your teeter-totter, because if your right half is completely in control, you don't really care about how you're feeling. And I need you, and you need to be in a place where you're at least understanding that your actions could have consequences. So you need to ask yourself how you're feeling about the interaction that's going on with the child, and how are they feeling about the interaction. Because it's really important to recognize what they're getting out of it, because they're getting something, as we've talked about. Every interaction teaches something. And then the last question is what to do in our relationship. So if you're in the middle of a disciplinary intervention with a child and you say to yourself, I'm not feeling real good about this. It's not going the way I wish it would have. And I can tell they're not happy about it. It's not helping them, and it's not helping our relationship. Then the best thing you can do is stop talking. Stop talking and gather your own wits about you first, and see if there's something you can do to at least not make things worse. And then when the opportunity presents itself to make things better, then take that opportunity. But we need to be in control of us first. You cannot give something to someone that you don't have yourself. If you don't have any self-control, you can't give it. If you don't have any patience, you can't give it. So do a little bit of a self-check on yourself first, and then see what you're doing to the relationship as far as your intervention is concerned. You can see we're down to the end of our time. I just want to leave you with the last one, help rewire their brain. This is something that you, I'm sure, are not surprised with everything I've said so far. Everything we do has an opportunity to rewire their brains, and what I'm hoping is that we'll do those things from our side that will make those the most positive rewirings that they possibly can be. And one final thought, and I did mention this a little bit earlier, try to keep in mind that the more effective discipline is done with the attitude about what you're teaching for future behavior, not just about controlling what's going on right there in the moment. We appreciate you being here. I hope you found this helpful. Keep in mind, just throw this last slide up there if you want credit for in-service training, for attending and participating today. You need to send to your regional trainer an email with the webinar name, date, the presenter name, and 3 things that you learned from it. And if you're listening with your spouse, you each need to send an email. Please don't send us emails saying, my spouse and I have listened to this. The audit requires that everybody has their own email to get the credit. So hopefully it's been helpful. If you have any questions on anything I've talked about, I'm more than happy to address them with you and help you with them. You can email me at brian.young@utahfostercare.org, or you can talk to any of your regional trainers. Thanks for being here, and have a great day.